You ever noticed how sometimes the smallest, most insignificant thing can just blow up into a huge controversy? Well, today we're diving into the story of how a single can of soda on a Princess cruise ship did exactly that. It ignited this massive firestorm online, and it reveals a much, much deeper story about corporate policies, what customers expect, and ultimately, trust.
So it all kicks off right here with this frantic post on Reddit. Just picture this. You're halfway through a 2-week dream vacation. You're settled in, you're relaxed, and then, bam, out of nowhere, the rules change on you. A Reddit user named Rescue Zeke sounds the alarm bell, and believe me, the entire cruising community started paying attention.
Okay, so to really get why people were so mad, you gotta understand the deal they thought they were getting. This passenger, and a whole lot of others, had bought into the promise of the Princess Premier package. It's supposed to be one of those all-inclusive deals where you pay one big price up front and then you can just relax. You're not supposed to be worrying about getting nickeled and dimed for everything.
And we're not talking about a small amount of money here. For 2 people, this package cost $2,520. That's a pretty hefty chunk of change, right? And when you pay that much, you have a certain level of expectation. You expect a smooth, seamless, worry-free vacation. So what was this big change that caused all the drama? What happened mid-cruise? Well, it boils down to the sudden, very strict enforcement of a policy that, let's be honest, had been pretty much ignored for years.
And this is where things get really confusing for the passengers. People who had paid for a package that gave them unlimited cocktails, wine, you name it, drinks that could cost up to $20 a pop were suddenly being told, oh, you have to pay about $3 extra for a can of Coke. You can just imagine the whiplash. People were thinking, wait a minute, my Jack and Coke is included, but a Coke by itself isn't? It just didn't make sense.
And that right there, that brings us to the real core of this whole conflict. It wasn't just some simple policy tweak. No, this was a full-blown clash between what the rules said on paper and what customers had been taught to expect after years and years of experience.
So check out this disconnect. Officially, in the rule book, it's stated for a while that these big, expensive packages only cover fountain soda. But the reality on the ship was a totally different story. For years, the crew just handed out cans of soda. No problem, no charge. In fact, a ton of passengers said the fountain soda machines on their ships were either always broken or didn't even exist. So cans became the default. It became this powerful, unwritten rule.
And look, this wasn't just a one-off thing or a few people misremembering. The internet blew up with veteran cruisers all saying the same thing. Yep, that's how it's always been. These comments just go to show that this was a widespread, established practice. It's what shaped what customers expected. So when Princess suddenly decided to enforce the written rule, it felt like a total bait and switch, especially to their most loyal customers.
So, of course, this makes you wonder, why? Why on earth would a company risk alienating its highest-paying customers over something so small? Well, let's actually unpack the numbers. Okay, so let's put this all into perspective. Keep this number in your head. Over $2,500. That's what people invested in what they thought was a premium, totally worry-free experience. Now compare that to this. About 50 cents. That's the estimated cost of a single can of soda to the cruise line. A travel vlogger, Allison from Let's Go Travel Tips, pointed out that she can buy a 12-pack for about $5. You know, Princess is paying way less than that in bulk. So you have this huge gap between what the customer paid and the actual cost of the item in question.
In this quote from Allison, it just hits the nail on the head, right? It perfectly captures what so many passengers were feeling. From a customer's point of view, it just made no sense. Why pick a fight over literal pennies when your customers have already spent thousands of dollars just to be there?
So, as you can imagine, this decision to suddenly start charging for sodas didn't exactly go over smoothly. In fact, it created real confusion, a lot of frustration, and just genuine chaos on board the ships. And, I mean, it was a complete mess. The rollout was just a total disaster. The crew members themselves didn't seem to know what was going on. Passengers were being brought cans of soda, not told there was a new charge, and then they'd see it on their bill later. One user, Dice Cat, was even charged for a can they said no to before the can was even opened. And on the very same ship, one bar would charge for a can, while another one wouldn't. It was just complete and utter inconsistency.
And then you get this quote, which is, wow. Just wow. Instead of getting a helpful explanation, a guest who was just trying to understand a confusing charge was met with this really confrontational attitude from a manager. That kind of experience
is the absolute opposite of the relaxing vacation people paid thousands for.
Okay, so what is really going on here? A lot of folks who follow the industry see this whole Sodagate thing as a symptom of something much bigger, a kind of troubling trend that's been happening in the cruise industry for a while.
Adrian from the Cruise and Travel Guy makes a really sharp point about this. He says when you start making these little nickel and dime changes, you fundamentally change how your customers think. You're basically training them to stop relaxing and to start scrutinizing every single detail.
And that is the whole point, isn't it? The reason you buy an all-inclusive package is to just turn your brain off, to remove all that friction. But Sodagate and other changes like it do the exact opposite. They force you to constantly be asking, wait, is this included? Am I going to get charged for that? That mental checklist is the enemy of relaxation. Your vacation stops being an experience and starts becoming a math problem.
And you know what the cherry on top is? To make it all worse, companies will wrap these kinds of changes in that classic corporate jargon. They'll call them enhancements. Right. Customers are smart. They see right through that. They know that when a company calls a price hike an enhancement, it's an enhancement for the company's bottom line, not for their vacation. And that kind of language just makes people trust you even less.
So when all is said and done, after all the drama, the angry Reddit posts, the arguments on the ship, what's the real verdict on Sodagate? What's the real takeaway?
Because at the end of the day, this was never, ever really about $3 for a can of Coke. It was about trust. It was about a company breaking an unwritten contract with its most loyal customers. They shattered an expectation that they themselves had built up over years and years of practice, and then they handled the fallout in the most chaotic and dismissive way possible.
And that really leaves us with this one big final question, doesn't it? Sure, saving a few cents on a can of soda might look good on some spreadsheet somewhere, but what's the real price a company pays when it breaks customer trust? The damage to brand loyalty, that could end up costing them far, far more.